had two. God, those last 2 days, I'm sorry. I know that maybe it just felt to some people like a sleepy Wednesday and Thursday baseball games. Ugh.
But here's the thing. You can't afford to have a sleepy game if you're the Giants right now. Like,
exactly.
You got to go out there every single day and play like Elliot Ramos does, with his hair on fire every day. That guy plays hard. Like, we talk about the home runs and he's hitting 3-something, but that guy plays hard every day. He runs, and I'm going to say other guys don't play hard. They play hard. They run hard to first this year, which is refreshing. But I'm just saying, like, you don't have the luxury based on how you started the season to just go out there and go, oh, it's a day game, no BP, we're going to go through the motions. You can't. When you go, I don't want to compare. I was about to compare it to something I shouldn't have. But when you go out there against the best players, no matter what sport it is, every night, you better be on your A game. You can't just go like walking through the meadow and I'm going to get through this, or I'm going to kind of take a day off mentally. Like, every game has to be like it's the last game you'll ever play. Is that hard? Yes. And I know people are in the cars going, no, it isn't. Like, you're getting paid $20 million a year.
Right.
Get after it. But I'm talking about the focus and the sharpness and the mental side of it. It's not just running around and diving for foul balls or, sliding at every base and getting dirty, the false hustle stuff. It's about like being on point every single day. And then when you get to October, if you're in the playoffs or not in the playoffs, you should be so physically drained that you can't even think, because you grinded every pitch, every at-bat for 162 games or whenever you played or whenever you pitched. And if you can get your players to buy into, like, look, we are going to be so fine-focused on all the little things. Like the attention to detail with the steals. Why did it have to get to the point where there was 90 steals against and we caught 18? Or we have 27 steals and the opponents have 91, or whatever it was.
Look, if the public knows, if average Joe fan is like, boy, we don't hold runners on. It's like, this should have been addressed way before it became so obvious.
It has to be an organizational philosophy that started at A-ball, that we're going to pay attention to detail. With runners, we're going to hold them. We're going to vary our times on the clock. We're going to not tip our moves. We're going to throw over. We're going to manipulate things to stop the running game. So by the time you get to the big leagues, you've already worked on that for 2 or 3 years or 4 years, whatever it is. And then there has to be an organizational philosophy on this is how we hit. And it has to be started at the lowest levels all the way up. We're going to work counts. We're going to be aggressive. Yesterday, I didn't see a lot of adjustments made. Gosman was throwing all fastballs and they were watching him go by and late on him. I don't know. I wasn't in the box hitting his hard if it had late hop and giddy up, but he just quit throwing his split. And if the game plan is to sit on the split and he's not throwing it, you got to reverse the game plan and figure it out. So there's little things. And I think the game historically has been passed down from veteran players to the current players. And I think we're getting to a point where the game is being passed down in a sterile manner, because there's not a lot of like old school baseball players that are passing it down now. So what are you passing down? If you're a 30-something player, you're passing down launch angle, exit velocity, spin rate, all the analytic stuff. Where back in the day, you're passing down knowledge on how to play the game the right way at the highest level. This is how we go about it. This is how we go about it. This is what we wear on the plane. We're not late on the bus. We don't laugh in our locker after a loss. We play hard for 3 hours a night. We get after it. And you pass that down to the next generation. And it's not about all the other stuff that's going on. It was about blowing up guys on a double play. It was about, hey, you got to run over the catcher. If he's standing there, you can't just like give up and let him tag you. So the game has been beautiful for a long time because it's been passed down. Like, that's your job, to pass the game down in a certain way so that the next generation plays the game with respect and dignity and pride that you did. Not that these guys don't. I just think that's missing from today's game. The veteran guy that has been there and done that knows how it's supposed to be, has sort of faded away because they're weeding those guys out of the game, number one, because you're not going to pay an older guy anymore. And then number two, the guys that are starting to get older, they don't know the game as well as the generation before.
Well, some of them are the managers, and they've been robbed of a lot of their power as well. FP is in for Dibs. It's Willard and Dibs, 888-957-9570. When you look at the entire organization of the Giants, what's the problem? And what do you do about it? Before I read exactly what Farhan said, because we've been referencing this, and I don't know that we've laid it out for everybody to really hear. I had because you brought up Ramos, and we brought up Soler earlier. I wanted to ask you this to see if you can, as a former player, kind of put a finger on what this means. When Elliot Ramos hits a home run, I feel like every time it matters. It matters.
It's with 2 strikes.
Every time it gives them the lead, or it gets them tied. Yesterday, you give up a 3 spot in the first inning. He walks right up in the bottom of the first and says, "Now the game's 3-2." Every time he hits a home run, it changes a baseball game. Every time Jorge Soler hits a home run, that game was already decided. Thank you for making 7-2, 8-2. You know what I mean? Or like a Yaz homer in the 9th yesterday. Thank you for making it a 5-3 loss instead of a 5-2 loss. Is that just like the way it's going this year, or is there a characteristic that we can grab from that?
There's certain guys that like to be up in the big situations. I find it kind of curious that Soler likes to lead off.
Does he like it?
I mean, that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
That he's comfortable there.
So he likes hitting.
I want my big guy that hits at 450 to be comfortable with the bases loaded and 2 outs.
Base, yes.
Or bases loaded and 1 out. I think the Giants paid Jorge Soler to drive in runs. And I know you only lead off once, and that whole thing has changed, and now he's going to get more at-bats, and the opposing pitcher better come out of the bullpen with his best stuff, because you're facing the first hitter could hit it 450 feet off you, so you better be on your A game, and maybe that takes some bullets out of the gun. Who knows? But, like, I want Jorge Soler to hit 4th.
Yeah.
And drive in, be 1 for 4 with 3 RBIs.
I want him to hit 7th now because of the way he plays.
2 for 5 with 2 RBIs.
Yeah, but originally, I'm with you. I wanted him to be, I thought he was, and that's what he was at the beginning of the year. He's a cleanup hitter.
But that's where the whole Jung-Hoo Lee thing has just screwed everything up.
Yeah, I hear you.
He was so good. And that was a great sign.
I agree.
That Farhan needs credit for.
I agree.
I'm not going to sit here and defend, like, be a homer and defend, but, like, you're mad at Farhan for why? Because I think as a president of baseball operations, your signature on the team is the team you put together. So if you didn't like the team you put together in spring training, then I think you can scream from the mountaintops that they need to go in a different direction. But if you screamed like, "I love this team, they did a great job," and Snell and Soler, oh my God, that guy hits him far, and then now they're underperforming. That's not Farhan's fault. That's the player's fault.
If you ask me why I'm mad at Farhan, I can't give you some like broad answer because of what you just said. A lot of this is not his fault, but I can do 2 things. I can give you some specific things that I found to be real Swiss cheese things. Like, and again, the shortstop position right now to me is an organizational mistake. The way that it's played out. You can't leave here in October and go, "That's going to be Luciano's spot." And then you get back in March and you're like, "It's Luciano." And he gets a little dinged. You're like, "Actually, it's not going to be Luciano. He's not ready." Actually, it turns out he might never be ready. Certainly not at that position.
And then you call him up and he fell flat on his face.
Call him up and he can't pick up a ground ball, but you signed Nick Ahmed, who you knew couldn't hit. And then in July, you're like, it turns out he can't hit. And then, okay, who's your shortstop? Well, let's try Tyler Fitzgerald. We had the Casey Schmidt experience at times. Maybe Wisely can do some things there. There's some maybes that I can't even blow off yet. Wisely and Fitzgerald have been, they've had their moments. They've done some really good things. They're young players. I'm not thumbs up or thumbs down yet. But halfway through now, more than halfway through, what I would argue is the most important year in his tenure, you can't still be sitting here shrugging your shoulders like, I'm not sure what we're doing at shortstop. Like that's not okay. And that position, that to me is on Farhan Zaidi. A lot of what you said, I fully agree with. When I look at these pitching staff numbers, I'm not faulting Farhan Zaidi. When Jung-Hoo Lee is not leading off, that's the fence's fault. That's not Farhan's fault. So there's the other thing, though, that I would say about Farhan is what you said in the crossover. Dude, you got to do a better job of knowing what to say and when. You can't, this is a bad quote. that I will read to you yesterday. Quote, overall, it's been a real disappointment. We pushed a lot of chips in with this team. I think we need the players to show us what the right direction is for us. He's referring to the next 2 weeks prior to the deadline. There are 14 games left before the trade deadline hits at noon on July 30th. Okay, that's or maybe it's 3 o'clock. I'm not sure which.
So far, I like that quote.
Well, there was one sentence I left out.
I know, that's the one.
Yeah, I left out the part where he said, we went over $200 million on this payroll. Dude, what exactly are you trying to say? Now you attached money to it. Nobody wants to hear that. You print money. We don't care that you went over 200. You should every year. You're the Giants. It feels like you're transferring guilt onto your players, which is anxiety-inducing and will do nothing. And I'd also argue if you truly believe that you're going to decide what to do with the future of the organization over the next 2 weeks, then you don't know how to do this job. No 2 weeks determines how you handle the future of the organization. And I know he's talking about buy, sell, what have you. But I could easily argue at no point in this important of a year should you be a straight seller. And as far as being an aggressive buyer, even if this team gets on a hot streak over the next 2 weeks, they're not good enough for you to sell off your top prospects to put someone at what position. This came 24 hours after he was quoted in the dugout as saying, we've got a good player at every position, so I don't even know where we would acquire someone. This all doesn't match, man. It just doesn't mix. That's what I would say.
No, and those are all very fair points. So you got Minnesota for 3. Then you're at Colorado for 3.
Right.
Dodgers for 4.
There.
Colorado for 4.
Because there's a doubleheader.
And in Oakland for 2.
Right, but the Oakland for 2, I think, is actually tucked after the deadline.
30th and 31st of July. When's the deadline?
On the 30th
it's the 30th
at early afternoon.
Okay, well, you could see where they could get hot.
Of course they could.
Based on that schedule.
And you're going to rework your concept for the organization because in those 14, they go 9-5?
If you drop 3 out of 4 to the Rockies from the 26th to the 28th.
At home.
Oh, man.
Right?
Or what if they get hot? I've told you this on the air, live with this little light on.
Yes.
That if the Giants aren't where they're supposed to be at the trade deadline, then we can panic. I've said that publicly. Then we can all be like, this is...
All right, so what...
The ship was turning around, like I told you on our segment yesterday. The ship was making that turn. The season was turning around. It was a big, long turn. All of a sudden, you're like, all right, I can see this team. One day I keep saying, oh, these guys are a playoff team. And then the next series, you're like, well, what's going on?
Exactly.
So is that coaching? Is that the players? I'm not sitting here going to defend Farhan because everyone always gets mad if I do. But like, how is this his fault right now? What's going on?
Well,
right now?
like the pieces that I would point to are the ones I just explained, which is I don't think he inspires confidence in his players. I don't think that he has put everybody in their best position, and I will include Bob Melvin in that even. I think they're, okay, Matos, your player of the week. Now you're going to go down. Now you're going to come back. We're in this same conversation. He victory lapped a little bit about Elliot Ramos, which many will point out. Only reason he even came up is because there was an injury. You didn't want him to come up. A year and a half ago, you gave up on him within the organization. You completely turned your back on him. So, I'm not going to, he's here, he's playing well, that's wonderful. But the other aspects, you have a point. It's obviously not all on him. I don't think Brian Price has done a good job as the pitching coach. I don't think Jorge Soler has commanded the strike zone. I don't think Blake Snell has a good agent.
But look,
I could do this comment for about 20 different people in the organization as far as them not doing their job right now.
Well, there is a certain leadership quality that comes with the position. When you talk about Bob Myers and you talk about John Lynch,
absolutely,
and you talk about Brian Sabian,
yes,
what when you think of those guys, to me it's more than numbers and analytics and putting contracts together. It's they surround themselves with the right people consistently, right? Sabian won 3 World Series. Proof's in the pudding. I mean, he had a rough start. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
but he got to the World Series 4 times. And obviously with Bob Myers, he's got 4 rings. Lynch hasn't gotten to the top of the mountain yet, but they have the best damn team in football every year with what seems like awesome personnel. And watching that receivers thing is the best show on TV.
And John, there's an interesting story that popped today where Kyle Juszczyk spoke publicly about taking a pay cut and how he was really upset about it for a little while. But then he got in the room and they did it, and it was important for him to remain the highest paid fullback in the game, and he was. But we didn't know this until recently. He took a pay cut, and he was not happy with it, but he also added at the end of the conversation, I love Kyle and John. I love those guys, and I really hated the idea of being anywhere else. So that's the kind of I think what you're talking about, the give and take, the respect, the leadership. Yes, I don't like your decision. You're ticking me off, but I also respect where you're coming from. I love what you guys have built here. I have no interest in being anywhere else. They offered the same thing to Eric Armstead. He plays for the Jags now. So, I think there's something to be said for what you're saying.
How good a GM are you, Mark?
How good of a GM am I?
No, how good of a GM are you if you can have one of your better players take a pay cut and still say that San Francisco is the greatest place ever and I don't want to go anywhere else?
Pretty good GM.
It's pretty good GM, and it speaks volumes for the organization. Like, he knows he's got a chance to win a Super Bowl.
Well, I mean, he also knows that I don't know how many NFL teams left even use a fullback the way that Kyle Shanahan uses a fullback. I bet Kyle Juszczyk probably, if you asked him right now, will you just follow Kyle Shanahan for the rest of your career? He'd be like, yep, I'm in.
Did you see the wedding and all the pictures and McCaffrey's wedding?
McCaffrey?
Yeah. You guys probably talked about that.
No, I don't. I'm like,
you're not into the personal life.
Well, no, like I just, the wedding. Cool. There you are. I mean,
you're anti-wedding guy.
Exactly.
Christy, are you listening?
Hi, sweets. I like other people's weddings. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, that's all right.
Like I'm not a TMZ.
Oh,
like I don't care. Like, do your thing.
I like behind the scenes anything.
That's great. No, behind the scenes, but like, what were the, chair coverings? Whatever, They
looked hot.
Yeah, they're all a bunch of good-looking people.
They're all good-looking, having fun. This receiver show is it.
Watched the first episode last night.
I did too. And I rewatched it today a little bit because I might have been fuzzy when I watched it last night.
I'll tell you what, I know this is probably not what you're talking about, but I was going to even do this at What's Bugging You.
Yeah.
I was so mad at myself last night.
Why?
My daughter and I made a plan the whole day. The little guy goes to sleep. The big guy's out of town. But she loves the 49ers. And I'm like, hon, they just released this receiver thing, and 2 of the 5 receivers are Niners. Would you like to, let's make a plan. We'll put little guy to bed, and we'll watch episode 1 together tonight. How often as a dad do you get to do something with your daughter? Because 99% of the time they're like, no, I don't want to go anywhere with you. She's like, I'd love to do that. Okay, let's do it. All right, here we go. 10:15, boom, Netflix, get it all set up. I don't even know if I got 4 sentences in. She's like, Dad. I'm like, damn it. I can't. I'm so tired every night. I can't. So I watched it. But I had to be woken up at least, and that's not a narrative on the show because it was great.
That's amazing.
It's a narrative on how overworked I am.
If you haven't watched it, the first episode is all Debo and Kittle. It's all Debo and
Kittle, almost. There's some Amon-Ra.
Yeah, he's whoa.
He's an intense dude.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He got brought up in an intense environment.
Yes.
Dad was Mr. Universe.
Mr. Universe.
All jacked on juice. He's on every kind of juice you can possibly take. There's video of him lifting when he's 8 years old doing bench press.
The workouts with Brown and his 2 sons, right? Because his brother is Equiminius is a receiver as well. The workouts are
there's a third
insane.
Osiris St. Brown as well.
And where's he playing?
Not in the
somewhere.